Welcome to the inaugural Chicago SHRM podcast this January 2021. I am Samara Beachdell. I'm an HR strategy manager. My toolkit is filled with 20 years of experience across HR, payroll, and benefits, and I continue to add to my knowledge every day. Throughout my career, I've provided services through a consultative approach to a range of businesses, anywhere from small entrepreneurships to large multinational corporations. In addition to my current role as manager of HR strategy, I serve as a volunteer member of the Chicago SHRM Board of Directors as chair of the certification committee. I'd love to turn this over to my co-host, Damian Boler, to introduce himself.
Thank you, Samara. Damian Boler here. I am a principal talent management business partner, and I've been in the industry for over 10 years, and I really enjoy connecting with business leaders and working to design key initiatives that help create and sustain high-performing businesses and leaders. So I am also a volunteer member of the Chicago SHRM Board of Directors as the Innovation Chair, and I'm excited to kick off this inaugural podcast with Samara, and excited for our discussion today.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Damian. And I just want to say, as members of Chicago SHRM, we are truly committed to elevating HR professionals in the Chicago area. Today's session, we really want to talk about, since we have the opportunity in January, we want to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. today. I'm going to turn it over to you, Damian. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think, January 18th is the upcoming holiday, or depending on when this airs or when you listen to it, it may have already passed. It's the beauty of podcasting, right? So I think the majority of people listening will know who Martin Luther King Jr. is and the accomplishments that he had. And I think, what we'll talk about today is really the man, the message, and the holiday. And really, how has it impacted us as individuals? How can it impact HR? And what are some different ways to think about going forward and carrying the message that Martin Luther King Jr. was delivering forward, especially in the world today. So I just wanted to high level share, one interesting fact as we were preparing for the podcast is that, I knew when the holiday was established and that it's the 35th anniversary of it, but what I did not know is how long it took for the holiday to actually become a national holiday and put into place. And so just one interesting fact is that the bill for the holiday was first introduced in 1979, and it wasn't officially ratified until 1983, and then finally first observed in 1986. And so, you think about 1979 to 1986, that's a good chunk of time that passed. And granted, there were a lot of other things going on in the world during that time frame. But as I was just reading and finding out that fun fact, just some of the reasons that were cited as to why the bill wasn't passed was really interesting. And the primary reason was the citing of cost. So as we think about, the holiday itself and how many companies and organizations still don't observe the national holiday and give that day off, cost still is an issue. So just one interesting fact as we prepare for this podcast that came to mind for me or caught my attention.
Absolutely. So to turn that over, let me ask you, Damian, what does Martin Luther King Day or MLK Day mean to you, or what's significant about it?
Yeah, so what's significant to me is the approach and the message that he delivered. I think, one of the things that always resonates with me, and I'm not gonna date myself, but in middle school, we didn't get the holiday off, although it was observed in Chicago. The school that I went to did not observe it, and the principal at that time. It was a private school, but he was very keen on Martin Luther King Jr. wouldn't want us to have the day off just to go sit around. And so while we were in school, although we didn't get the holiday off, we always had to do a service project. And that is something that really stuck with me and resonates with me to this day. So no matter what company I've worked for post being an adult or being an adult today, I've always tried to take that time and provide service to others who are in less fortunate situations than myself, or just service to communities that I may not be as connected with. So, and now as a parent, I'm trying to instill that into my children, although they're a little too young to fully get it, but my oldest, he's starting to ask questions, and they talk about it in school and all that good stuff. So that's what resonates for me the most when I think about the holiday and how I observe it and how I try to incorporate his message into my daily life.
Awesome.
What about for you?
For me, it's funny, when we started planning this podcast, I told you that I remember when I was 8, and I will date myself. This was an announcement in a Scholastic News article in 1984 that the Martin Luther King Jr. Day commemorating his birthday was going to be a holiday. So like, that's one of the things that I have saved in my memories box from when I was a kid. And that's one of the moments in time where something was so new and different and made me aware of something in such a way that brought my mind to a new and different way of thinking, a new and different style of even existing in space. So this was a different thing than I had seen my first 8 years. So it's kind of an interesting piece for me, because it started me on my journey of looking to those things that I could be aware of. So not as much of the service piece as you, Damian, but more of what can I find out about things I don't know about. It's a really awesome way to expand your mind. And that's kind of where I started on that journey, and being interested in that movement and what the civil rights movement of the 1960s and beyond, really how it took shape and was more than Dr. King himself. So those are still alive and present today, and watching the evolution and the knowledge expanse is really amazing to watch.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So, it's interesting. I think, if we were in normal times and sitting around at a table and maybe had some other people with podcasts, you'd hear so many different perspectives and insights that people take away from the day and the message and the man. And, what do you think from, an HR standpoint, the connection points are, or what it means to HR?
Yeah, that is such a great question, and so relevant to our population, right? That we're talking to and talking with and talking about is, how does this holiday impact HR? And I think, respectfully, over the past few years, but specifically over the past year, we've been very impacted by kind of a modern civil rights movement, so to speak, or the social justice that has been brought to the forefront of our minds. And really a whole new evolution of that is affecting us today. And as we in HR look at what we can do, even the teeniest, tiniest stepping stones of respect and recognition of who we are as a working population, who are the human beings that work for us every day, and how do we come to work representing and celebrating all of our humans. We're not just human capital, we're human beings. So how do we celebrate that every day? So this has been a wonderful showing and opportunity, quite honestly, for a number of HR teams across the US, certainly, to pick up that holiday and celebrate in a way that has not been, unilateral. So I think it's an interesting way that we've taken this one person and truly broadened that to our human population. How about you? What do you think it means to our HR folks?
Yeah, I really like your piece around the connection to, we're not human capital, we're human beings, right? I think that's something we always need to keep in the front of our minds. And for me, it's if you go along the lines of that broader point, the broader connection. For me, recently, it's been thinking about the workforce and the almost the clear dichotomy of, on one hand, you're seeing all these articles and people talking about how do we work virtually and how do we help people sustain, sanity, if you will, while they're working virtually and Zoom calls and all that. And then I think about the other side where actually the majority of the workforce is for a lot of these companies, and that's on the air quotes front lines, right? They may not be the doctors or the physicians out there, and thank you for all the what they're doing. And I'm also talking about the people working in the grocery stores, the people shipping packages, the people who are still having to go into buildings every day to keep the life that we have or the society that we have continuing to run. So the people at our water plants and our garbage pickup services, and not nearly as much conversation is happening around those individuals and those people. And so when I think about that with HR, it's how are we supporting them, right? How, and beyond just, a lot of companies you see giving spot bonuses and things like that. I mean, but what else are we doing? How else are we taking care of them? How else are we making sure that they feel supported and that, when this is over, that they remain human beings and not human capital. And because things have shifted, it's not, they're not the first ones to be touched when something goes wrong, right? So that's where my mind went this week as I was preparing for this podcast, for our conversation.
Yeah, I love that. And, that leads us right into one of our takeaways is, Damian, when we were talking about this first podcast, one of the things that you mentioned to me that stood out to you about Dr. King was his servant leadership and service learning. And that ties in so well with what you just said about, how do we serve our human population and how do we serve the people that work for us? And that really is the heart and soul of every HR practitioner in the world, because whether we serve a C-suite, a peer group, or a frontline worker, whether that's in grocery, production, IT, we serve human beings across all of our populations. Department of 1 to department of 10,000. The takeaway is how can we serve our populations today in a way that works and respect every level of every group that we serve. I love that. And what's one thing that we can take away in, what I thought of was service learning, to loop back to that 1983, 84 moment for me. What else can I learn? What else can I do to broaden my knowledge and understanding of the populations that I serve as an HR leader? And how can I bring that into my strategy from day 1 to day 365 every year? Not truncating for leap year. But what is it that I can do to keep learning and growing with my people? And really what one of the things that we've looked at in my current business is how can we continue to develop our understanding of our populations and look at who we are as an entire group, and respect and recognize all of our groups. So one of the fun things that came out this year in 2021 is not only did we commit in 2021 to observing and having all of our US locations observe MLK Day this Monday, January 18th. And to your point, whether it's in the future or the past when you're listening to the podcast, we also committed to really thinking through what other holidays that we can observe across our world population. So we have Chinese New Year coming up, and we have several things later on in the year. Chinese New Year just being top of mind because it's so close, but like a holy celebration of lights, HOLI. It's a really fun holiday later on this year. So we may start recognizing and celebrating and learning about our population through our internet, and the stories our populations are invited to tell, because we love to hear their voices. So how about you? What's your takeaway?
Yeah, I think I love to hear that you're focusing on getting to know your people and involving or incorporating their holidays into your organization and your culture. And I think for me, it's along those lines. And it was something you said earlier that kind of changed my mind a little bit. But it's around being bold as HR, right? I think as HR, and I think about what the civil rights movement, you weren't timid if you were in the civil rights movement, right? So, I think the message and the holiday and being bold about how you are going to incorporate and really drive your organizations to be more equitable, how you're going to drive them to be more inclusive. Don't just play it safe. Don't just play timid. Don't do the little things, but I mean, the little things still matter, but what are the bold goals and what are the bold actions that we as HR can take? And so that's the takeaway for me, is like, just how can we be more bold around this?
That's really cool. And one of the themes I've heard certainly is that intentionality, and something that arose, since we're speaking to our HR folks, with affirmative action and affirmative action programs, we know what it is today, and going back to the intent behind it, it really, intentionality starts to be a conversation point again, and making it an intentional, bold move, and be bold with your steps. That's a really key thought to take away. And how can you be bold and intentional? So as you dip your toe in the pool and decide how your bold looks and how your intentional looks, I would charge our HR community to look at what are the other things that you can do to bring it forward. Is that service leadership, service learning? Is that bold and intentional actions that you can take in your business to drive that progression forward? To Damian's point, Damian, we need to wrap up right there. That was gold.
Well, I think this has been a good inaugural podcast for us. I think I've enjoyed our discussion and just sharing our thoughts around the holiday and Martin Luther King Jr. and the message that he was conveying. And I think this is just the start, right? And I think it was timely for us to have this idea about this podcast and to make the connection here. But I'm excited to what we have in the future as well around this podcast and what we can hope to bring to the Chicago SHRM community. So I know we have some more topics on the slate. So you want to share a little bit about what we might have coming up?
Thanks, Damian. Yeah, I'm going to go super HR geek here for a sec and say we're so excited. So yeah, thank you so much for pairing together with me on this, and so excited to see what we can talk about. There's such a jazz in the air. We have topics that we'll be throwing around. Sometimes it's just Damian's thoughts and my thoughts, seeing what we're experiencing in HR today, what's a challenge, what's a win. We have our annual Elevate conferences. We'll bring you some speakers and sneak peeks, maybe a spoiler alert for our March Elevate sessions. And we'll try and keep you really engaged with the Chicago flavor of SHRM and HR as we support and highlight our community in the way that we can, as only Chicago can do.
I like it. I like it.
Well, Damian, let me say it is my absolute pleasure to work with you on the Chicago SHRM podcast. I know we won't always get the chance to be face-to-face, but as long as I'm hearing your voice on the airwaves, we'll be good.
Same here. Same here. I'm happy that we got to do this, and I'm looking forward to what's next and what's coming forward. So thank you, and talk soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Damian. See you next month, or hear you next month for the next Chicago SHRM podcast.
All right. Take care.